as FSU dominates Georgia Tech during its fourth victory of the year, fifth victory of the year, 41-16. My name is Pat Burnham. I'm a football analyst for the Osceola, and I am joined by former FSU offensive lineman and Osceola football analyst Mark Salva, live from Nashville. Mark, a dominating win, 41-16 for Florida State to move one win away from bowl eligibility. Really, the story of this game early was FSU's dominant defense, allowed just 3 yards in their first quarter. FSU started a little sluggishly on offense, penalties, couldn't get lined up. But boy, once they got on track, did they ever? In the second quarter, scored 17 points to take a 24-3 lead. On the day, FSU racks up 642 yards of total offense. Jordan Travis, as we'll get into a little bit later, passes for 396, and FSU holds Georgia Tech to 264 total yards of offense in the game. FSU scores on 7 of its last 8 drives, and we'll get to the defense and offense here in a second, but just give me your overall view of the game from your perspective.
Yeah, you're ripping off a bunch of stats there that are obviously a dominating performance. But it doesn't feel that way. It felt like it does and it doesn't. I mean, early on there were, the mishap on the goal line with the bad snap on the direct snap, some penalties, just some sloppy execution, some sloppy penalties, some bad calls. I mean, that officiating group is terrible. It just felt like we left so much out there, and yet we still dominated the game, and that just goes to show. I think, Georgia Tech, when Jeff Sims wasn't going to play, I don't think they felt like they could compete. And it obviously defensively, they did just what I hoped they would do. I said in my keys going into the game that we need to pressure, we need to, send a bunch of guys, have guys coming from everywhere. That's exactly what we did. And it really, our advantage was our front 7 versus their suspect offensive line, and we took total advantage of that, and that kept us in the game until finally the offense got moving.
Yeah, and listen, you mentioned pressuring for all sides and rattled those young Georgia Tech quarterbacks, and in the first half alone, FSU had 32 tackles total for the half. 10 of those were behind the line of scrimmage, either TFLs or sacks. It was a dominant performance, 24 yards total. And by the way, if you are a viewer and have a question for Mark and I, please feel free to leave a comment in the comment box, and we want to thank you for watching. But yeah, Mark, talk a little bit about FSU getting on track on offense in the second quarter. Obviously, we had talked about one of the keys of this game, because Georgia Tech does struggle offensively, especially playing behind, was to take an early lead, and Florida State needed to find some big plays in the passing game, which had kind of disappeared over the course of the last 2 or 3 games in that 3-game losing skid. But just talk a little bit about what you saw once the offense did get on track.
Yeah, well, we started off with some good running gains game, and Trey Benson started out really, really strong, and then we get down there on the goal line and have that mishap with the direct snap to Toffoli. And that just kind of left you just hanging your head like, oh my gosh. The one thing I did see was, we had guys running free in the secondary, and Jordan was really he was a little errant early on. I don't know if that's just rust from an off week or whatever it was. I did see that, on some of those trail routes and some of those vertical routes, he was really zipping them in there. And I think later on in the game, he put a little more air under them. So maybe, obviously he got coached a little bit, just put it up there, let our guys, give our guys a chance to make a play on the ball. And obviously we were able to do that because honestly, they couldn't really cover our guys. And that was evident from the beginning. We just weren't getting them opportunities with the way Jordan was throwing the ball early. So you felt like it was going to come, right? You felt like it was there, but it just early on that first quarter, it was just like, if we let this get away from us, we can be in trouble here if we don't take advantage of these opportunities. And obviously, but then again, then you looked at the way the defense was playing, you're like, they're not going to score. You didn't feel like they would. So.
Yeah, I even said something that would have got to be 21-3. That would be a very difficult deficit for Georgia Tech to overcome, and it was. And listen, they did play a little bit better in the second half offensively, Georgia Tech. What do you give that credit to? Florida State's defense was not as dominant, but again, the game was never in question. But just what led to their success? You obviously have to be a little bit impressed with that true freshman quarterback they inserted in the second quarter or into the first quarter. He kind of found some confidence late or late in the second quarter. Obviously, we saw the second half. He played pretty well. I want to ask you this question. On defensively, when Georgia Tech did the onside kick to start the second half, FSU had its second-team defensive line in the game. Did not play any of their regular starters. Were you a little bit surprised by that?
At that point, yeah, maybe a little bit. You know, I do know that, you know, seeing Fabian Levin in the game obviously was really good to see. He obviously wasn't quite 100%. You know, you could just see he's trying to shake off a little rust. He wasn't just wrecking things. But, you know, I felt like, you know, I think that the shock of the onside kick pretty much, you know, and then throwing our second team out there, we just quite didn't catch up at the moment, you know. And I think that, you know, that gave them a little bit of confidence at that time, you know. But honestly, I wasn't necessarily worried. It was just kind of irritating. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Listen, Florida State did not give Georgia Tech time to establish any offense. I think for the game, there were 4 sacks for Florida State, 10 tackles behind the line of scrimmage. Jamie Robinson, 10 tackles total, including a tackle for a loss. As you said, they were bringing pressure from everywhere. Kalen DeLoach, 6 tackles. Jared Verse was in the backfield every game, almost all game when he was in the ball game. 5 tackles, 2.5 tackles for a loss and a half sack. Did they play up? I mean, they played better than I thought they would in the first half. Any concerns after the second half, particularly facing a freshman quarterback?
No, not really. I mean, I think we kind of dialed back the pressure a little bit.
Yep.
You know, played a little safer, tried to play the clock a little bit, maybe. Not at all. Look, bottom line is they were outmatched. Our personnel was better than their personnel. They just didn't have it, and you know, it's one of those deals which is rare for us to say these days. It seems like, but especially after the last 3 weeks. So it was really good to really control the game from the outset. You know, even though it was a little bit uncomfortable in terms of the way we were a little bit sloppy, but coming off a bye week, you know, I would have liked to have seen a cleaner game, but how can you argue with the way we dominated defensively, especially in the first half?
Yeah, you can. I mean, they had their longest drive was 19 yards in the first half. I mean, they had 2 drives where they were minus 18 yards total. Another drive that was minus 6 yards. So yes, defense was dominant. Tatum Bethune and Kalen DeLoach, very active. What did you see from those guys that you like today?
Yeah, no, like you said, very active. You know, again, they're playing so fast. And I really like to see that when they're playing fast and they're really decisive, they're really impactful players. And so that's good to see. They really were, you know, and I got to kudos to the offensive line. I think the offensive line played pretty well today. You know, and because really the mistakes weren't necessarily, you know, I remember one linebacker run through on a run. But for the most part, they did a good job. And some of those penalties were just terrible calls. Honestly, you know, that one on Rob Scott was just terrible.
And to your point, the FSU offensive line surrendered 1 sack and just 3 TFLs. Georgia Tech came into this game as one of the best behind-the-line defense. They were 13th in the nation in TFLs, about 8 per game, held to 3, kept Jordan Travis clean most of the game. Did any of the offensive linemen in particular stand out to you with dominating games?
You know, nobody in particular. I think Rob Scott is just playing at a high level right now for sure. I think Turn of Time actually played probably his best game. You know, I think the middle 3 have been pretty solid all year, and I think they were pretty much that. I was really impressed. I tell you, I was watching Julian Armella really close there at the end. I really like him. He's athletic and he's mean. He plays a great effort. And all those young guys that went in. I mean, Estes and 56. Drawing a blank on his name.
Zane Herring.
Yeah, Zane Herring. Those guys were getting after it, you know, and that was good to see. Steckel, you know, did what he does. So yeah, it was good to see those guys get after it a little bit against a tired defense. So yeah, you know, look, we did what we had to, what we were supposed to do, and you know, I'm not going to take that for granted after the last several years. Honestly.
No,
you know?
Coming off a 3-game losing streak too. I mean, listen,
especially yes,
we keep on saying that we want to see these guys play up to their capability, right? Not play down to the level of competition. And this is, this was a game they should have dominated and absolutely did. So, you got to be happy from that standpoint. And, 642 yards versus 240 something, dominated in every way. Now, listen, you and I have been consistently pounding the table for more Trey Benson in our lives, and we got it today. He had his biggest workload of the season. 18 rushes for 111 yards, 1 catch for 10, and Georgia Tech has one of the best two of the best linebackers in the league. Illy is top 17 in the nation in tackles, and they had a hard time tackling Trey Benson. We thought we'd be impressed. We thought he'd give FSU more production if they give him the ball more. Just talk a little bit about your impressions of Trey in this ball game and what he means to this FSU offense moving forward.
I like to know what he squats. I don't know what he squats. What do you know?
I don't, but I imagine it's a lot.
I mean, people just bounce off him. It's really unique the way he breaks tackles, runs through arm tackles, and then he has the speed to do something with it. Especially early, man. He had a couple of runs early where if he kicked out one more tackle, he was gone. Right. And I just man, he definitely brings the physicality to the offense. And Philly did a nice job too, but Trey is just a little different in that, he's such a physical runner, the way he breaks tackles, and the speed he has, I like him a lot. The fumble was unfortunate for him. The guy punched it out from behind, and I guess that happens, but good backs don't do that. We got to make sure that that gets, ball security is more of a priority there. But that if that's the worst thing I can say right now, it didn't cost us anything in the long run, but that could cost us in other games in the future. So that's got to get fixed. But yeah, I really like the way he brings the physicality.
And he had a big workload today too. 18 total touches for 154 yards, 13 rushes for 70 yards, and 5 for 84 receiving. FSU, we talked about the big play offense, 8 pass plays, 15 yards or more, totaling 301 yards, and 7 of those were of 24 yards or more. Johnny Wilson, 3 catches for 111. Ja'Kai Douglas is back and healthy. 5 catches for 63. A touchdown. Talk a little bit about what Ja'Kai can do for this offense moving forward.
Yeah, what a versatile guy. Playing the slot, can play out of the backfield. He's got really good hands, great movement out in space, tracks the ball real well. That guy's a weapon. I mean, he is. And so I'm looking forward to see, how we can utilize him in different ways. I mean, it's all, you get, Benson and Toafili and him in a game. It's almost like you have 3 backs in the game at some point, and so there's so many things you can do. He's a matchup problem. And I love those guys that are tweeners, tight end, wide receiver, running back, split, wide out. I mean, guys that when you have a certain personnel group in the game, you're not sure exactly what you're going to get. And so he gives you that. And that gives you an advantage as a play caller, to get matchups that you want, and that's a huge advantage. I really like that guy. Guy seems to make plays and make touchdowns, and that's what you like.
Hey, we saw a little bit of 21 personnel start the game. We hadn't seen much of that. What were your thoughts on that? And do you think is that something Florida State should do more of? And thanks, Brian Taylor. We appreciate the comments, and we are going to keep going, my man. We're going to keep going the rest of the season. What are your thoughts on 21 personnel? We saw a little bit of 12 again. They really seem to create issues for opposing defenses, obviously, because part of it is they have to balance up. But what do you like about those 2 personnel groupings, and do you think that's something Mike will look at running more as the season moves forward?
Yeah, I mean, well, of course, I'm an old school guy. I like versatility, right? I know, the trend these days is to go fast, a lot of receivers and do all that. For me personally, I'd much rather have versatility in personnel groups where you can formation, motion, get matchup issues by putting different people into the game. And so having 21 personnel and 2 tights in the game and 12 personnel in the game, to me, it just gives you a lot of options in how you can force leverage problems. And, it also opens up passing game and play action pass. And I'll tell you one thing that really got me excited. We ran some draw. We ran a couple of plays where we ran a few draws, and that's something that you don't see in football very much anymore. You'll see the lag draw a little bit where a guy likes to sprint out and hand the ball at the last minute and that kind of thing. But man, I love seeing that, especially in middle downs, middle distances. And those seem to work out really well for us. It puts defenses in bind. So, yeah, I like the versatility that we're able to produce by putting different people in the game and putting these tweeners in the game that people don't know exactly what you have.
Well, listen, you mentioned putting different guys in the game. Jordan completed passes to 10 different receivers. Totally led the team with 5 catches, Ja'Kai with 4. Then you had Cameron McDonald. We rediscovered him in the passing game, 3 catches for 39 yards. We didn't see Marcus and Douglas much in the passing game this year today, but he did rush a lot. Now, one of the things we've talked about, those big plays kind of disappeared against Clemson and NC State. And the competition will get a little better as we move forward with Miami and then, of course, Syracuse, which has an outstanding defense. Mark, is there anything that Florida State can do to ensure that they can find these big plays? I know it's kind of an open-ended question, and without looking at what Syracuse does specifically, or Miami and Syracuse do specifically on defense at this point, but how does Florida State continue to manufacture these big plays in the passing game against the better defenses they're going to play as they close out the year with a 4-game run?
Yeah, it seems to me in the run where we lost those 3 games, we kind of got stuck in a little bit of a rut offensively, where the personnel group kind of remained kind of the same. And, I think when you manufacture these big plays, it's because you're doing that. You've shown a lot of versatility. You're showing a lot of different personnel groups. You're showing a lot of formations, motions. You're finding matchups where you get guys loose. I mean, is it Preston Daniels?
Yes.
Preston Daniels on that. I mean, he was wide open early in the first quarter, and that's one of the passes I was talking about. He was open, and Jordan zipped it in there, and it was just a high, hard one, and he couldn't handle it. And then later on, you saw the play to Toafili where he was matched up on the defensive end, a la Charles Kelly, Darwin Walker trying to cover a back, right? I mean, that reminded me of that. They tried to do the same thing, cover Toafili, but he put air under it. And then he put air under that one over to Johnny Wilson, where Johnny could get up and make a play on a long yard situation. So obviously there was a correction made on the sideline. So kudos to the coaching staff for recognizing, he was juiced up or something, where he's throwing these darts, and then, hey, put a little air under it, let our guys make plays. And so we can formation, we can motion, we have versatility in the way we line up to create matchups, to cut guys loose and make these plays. Now it's up to our quarterback to execute and make the throw required.
Yeah, well, the throw you mentioned, Johnny Wilson down the sideline, was a tremendous throw and a tremendous catch. I mean, that guy has a chance. Boy, I hope he sticks around for a while because he's a tremendous football player. I think he's kind of like Jared Verse. He's a little bit further along than what we thought we'd be when we got him, right? Both of those guys have turned into the guys that can dominate games. Only 3 catches, but one for a 72-yard touchdown. So Johnny kind of got back in the groove, and another guy that got back in the groove, and you can't overlook this because it may be important as we move down the season. Ryan Fitzgerald was 2 for 2 in field goals today. It didn't matter these, technically because of the blowout, but good from 34 yards, good from 24 yards. And I think that could be something that could help FSU moving forward, his confidence. And of course, listen, it's always a good day at the office when you pull up the stats and you see that your punter never got to see the field once the game started. Alex Campamano never saw the field, so that is a great sign for Florida State. All right, looking forward, you got Miami, who is locked in an overtime battle right now. The last time I checked, anyway, 9-9 with Virginia, and they are trying to, emulate Auburn. I mean, Iowa's offense up there, so. Evidently, they've gotten to the Ferentz mode. But all right, moving forward to Miami. Listen, they have not played well of late. They are, I believe, 3-4, maybe 3-5 after this game. It is a rivalry game. It's a game that these kids will all be fired up for. A lot of Florida kids on these rosters. We know these games don't always go the way the records indicate, the way the odds makers figure them, and we think that Florida State will be a favorite going into this game. But you've played in those games. First of all, what would you tell this Florida State football team as they put this game to bed and look forward to playing the Hurricanes down in what it will be I would assume, predominant Florida State crowd at Seminole Hard Rock Stadium?
Yeah. I'll give these guys a break this game, saying it was a noon game after an off week, started a little slow offensively. If we cannot do that next week, you got to come out with ultra intensity, focus, and discipline, and you just need to get after it. You got to get your mentality right to get in a fight, right? And I don't mean a physical fist fight, but I mean a fight for every single play, every down, and just get yourself ready for that, because it is a rivalry game, and obviously there's going to be a lot said between now and next Saturday about both programs. You got to tune all that stuff out, and you just got to just focus in on what it is you as a player have to focus in on and execute. Because here's the thing, it's got to be second nature, right? You got to know what to do. Knowing what to do has to be second nature, so you can concentrate on your attitude and effort. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
In other words, if you're having to think out there instead of concentrating on, I got to get after this guy, that I think is a recipe for failure, honestly. So, I mean, I'm getting fired up just thinking about it.
Yeah, I know that you are. That's why I asked the question.
Yeah, oh man.
Well, listen, a dominating 41-16 win for Florida State to get to 5-3. Head to Miami with some momentum, which they needed coming off the bye week, and they certainly got it in spades with a dominating defensive effort, and also as well as offense. Just moving at will after the second quarter started. We will have more post-game coverage from Bob Ferrante and Kurt Weiler at the rivals.floridastate.rivals.com. Please follow us there. Mark and I will be back tomorrow with Kez McCorvey for Seminole Sidelines, which will start at 6 p.m. So we'll be back tomorrow to kind of refresh our views on this game as we get a chance to watch the game film and come back and rehash what we saw in our second look, and then obviously look even further into the Miami game. But for for Mark Salva, I'm Pat Burnham. We certainly appreciate you guys joining us on First Impressions live from Florida State, Georgia Tech, and live from Doak Campbell Stadium. Thanks for joining us. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll see you next week. About 20 minutes after the Miami game finishes from Coral Gables. Thanks a lot for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Go Noles.